Good, good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. I have my superstar panel, Attorney Milton and Vanita Banks joining me
Morning.
today. But before we get started, I'd like to tell everybody Thanksgiving is this week. Be thankful for what the good Lord has done for you, being on planet Earth for another Thanksgiving. We're all very grateful. And as you start your travel, we're going to have record travel. Be safe and always be cautious because we're going to have a record number of people traveling for Thanksgiving, and there's going to be a lot of statistics of bad things happening. And so next Saturday, because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we will not be broadcasting our show because of the Thanksgiving holiday. And during that time period, they predict in America, in one day, next Sunday, there's going to be 1% of the American population going to be at airports. 1%, like 3.4 million folks are going to be traveling. And that's going to be historic also. Now, before I get started, we got a lot of things to talk about, but let's talk about some things that have been going on in Indianapolis that is really a sad commentary. This year in our city, we've had need to stop. But since August the 1st of this year, we've had 15 shootings by police officers since August the 1st. Some of the black ministers, in response to that, had demanded that the black chief of police resign. You know, now, every case is different. And I want to just basically tell you what I mean. First, I get lots of calls about this because I've investigated some of these shootings myself. When in our country can a police officer use deadly force? In the United States, a police officer can lawfully use deadly force when he reasonably believes that the person poses a significant threat of serious bodily injury or death to themselves or other people. Now, the use of deadly force is also authorized when it is used to prevent the escape of a fleeing felon, or when the officer believes escape would pose a significant threat of serious bodily injury or death to members of the public. Before the famous case of Tennessee versus Garner, which involved shooting a young suspect in the back, there was less protection. But based on the Supreme Court, the key is what is reasonable. Now, in defense of that, because I did a lot of these litigation, the police training was altered. We ended up getting some tape through one of our sources, and I discovered that in the academy, the police were being trained to say these magic words. Whenever they're confronted by a shooting, particularly of African-American male, they would say these words: "I was in fear of my life." And when they said those magic words, then it invoked the doctrine of qualified immunity. And so the point I'm making is that these shootings need to be examined. And there is a problem, though, with the investigation of many of these. Now we've had body cameras since 2000 in the city of Indianapolis, and these body cameras are really good source of evidence. So the number one thing we have to do is insist that every shooting that they leave the body camera on. The second thing, though, is that the police department is hesitant in releasing in certain situations. They seem to release it right away when they have clear and convincing evidence of a justifiable shooting. But then there's others that I don't understand. Let me give you an example. A case that I investigated back in October involved Darcel Edwards. He was a young man that was shot in a tree at 25th and I think Martindale, but it's 25th Street. In about 4:15 in the morning, he had a wreck, and he climbed up into a tree, and the police gave him verbal command to escape the tree, and they shot him in a tree, But the forensic evidence seemed to suggest that this was a non-justifiable homicide by the police officer. Now, but the strange thing happened after they shot this young man in the tree. By noon that day, they got an order to destroy the tree. So they brought out a company and they actually took the tree apart and grind it up, the whole tree. It's the craziest thing I've seen. So I talked to witnesses, and the witnesses' testimony contradict what the police officer said. They said, shoot me. No, he said just opposite. Don't shoot me. I had epilepsy. And so there we are. And so to a lot of people in Indianapolis, what we should be seeking are the following. One is transparency. Two, the video footage from those body cams immediately. We want to make sure that they use the cameras in their vehicles, if they have them, and their body cams immediately, release that evidence right away. Because you're losing credibility when you say that it's justifiable shooting and you withhold the evidence. There's been many of these cases that I've seen over the years that I subsequently learned was bad shooting. And only in the recent term are we now holding these police officers accountable. And there you are. Milton, Vanita, I had to expound on that for a second because I was a little bit frustrated at the high number of shooting that is occurring in our city of Indianapolis since August. I mean, 15 is too many shooting by police officer of our citizen.
And as you stated, Attorney Lee, at least 8 of those were fatal shootings. And I'm familiar with the concerned clergy of Indianapolis that had called for the resignation of Police Chief Randall Taylor as a result of these recent shootings, as you stated, since August 1st, 2020. There have been at least 14 shootings. And one of my questions, and my understanding is that the chief of police does have the full backing of the recently reelected mayor of Indianapolis. And so I am wondering a couple of things. What is the comprehensive, holistic police reform strategy or policy? What are the transparency and accountability measures with respect to the use of force policy? And you mentioned there is a increased use in mandated body cameras, and that those videos should be made available immediately. I do not understand why, and I think that the public should demand to know why that tree was cut down. So let me stop there. I'm reading a quote from Police Chief Taylor, which states that a factor in many of these cases is the lack of compliance by the public to directions given by officers. And quote, the common denominator most of the time is that people refuse to, follow the orders that are given. So those are just some of my thoughts with respect to what's going on in Indianapolis. And of course, in Chicago, we are subject to a consent decree that was issued in 2019. We also have a community police oversight board. And of course, we're working on developing that critical trust that's important and required between the police and our communities in Chicago.
Hey, for the record, I don't favor the resignation of the police chief, at least not at this point, because there are greater forces like the FOP in our city. They they favored the opponent in the mayor's race. And so every type of police reform that's designed to prevent the death of African American and by police officers, they're against. And so, in other words, there's a lot of factors in play here. And I think that the key thing that I'm looking for is transparency. And one of the things, Milton, that they used to do that was very important in our city, when there's a police shooting, they get a lawyer on the scene. So they get defense lawyers that come out to the scene. They're involved in the autopsy process. And so they get advice or counsel right away. What they used to do early on, when I used to do a lot of these, is that they used to make the officers subjected to a video tape interview right after shooting, explain everything step by step why he did it. Now they get lawyers, they give a statement several months later, and now they've had a chance to look at all the evidence, video thing, and then now you get, quite frankly, the individual suspect don't get the same rights.
That's right. You were breaking up a little bit, Nate. There are a lot of, well, one question I have, maybe two. Did the young man that was in the tree, did he have a weapon on him at the time? Was he displaying a weapon at the time they shot him?
He did not have a weapon on him, nor did they find a weapon on him. They say that they thought he had a weapon because he had a holster in his belt. But the problem is that my whole problem with that case, quite frankly, is that there's a failure of de-escalation. Based on my own interview of witnesses, there was no de-escalation. The police officer increased the tension, and where in the hell is he going to go? He's in a tree.
And he's up a tree, and they are undoubtedly behind some type of protected barrier, either their cars or the car motors, or they're not out in the open where they're necessarily in complete danger. They have some cover. I would believe if he's up in a tree and they come to that scene, they don't stand out in the open and say, you can shoot me too. So it's kind of ridiculous to me that they would justify shooting the man because they believe he could have a weapon because they see a holster. I think the requirement is that you see a gun. A holster don't shoot you. You could have left the gun at home. You could have lost the gun, but the gun is the threat, not the holster. So I don't know how they could justify that shooting. But, Nathaniel, I've worked in this area since Rodney King and before Rodney King in 1990. And I've come to the conclusion that Malcolm Gladwell, a writer that I follow the best I can, wrote a book recently, Talking to Strangers. And in the last part of that book, he talks about emotional labor and how police officers do what's called emotional labor, like lawyers, like hospital workers, like taxi cab drivers. They have to deal with the public every day. And they go from the public that they deal with, go from 1 to 10 in the snap of a finger. One guy you're talking to is like you. Another person is like the guy that just got out of the hospital. So they have to be able to intelligently process who and what they're dealing with, the situations, and not just take every situation. As one cop told me, he talks to a person on Skid Row with obvious mental problems the same way he would talk to a man with no mental problems. And that is get in their face and he takes command. Whereas we all understand that people with mental illnesses do not deal well with a confrontation, a direct on confrontation. You got to back off, de-escalate, just talk, don't intimidate. Force do not work with them. You follow me? And this officer who participated in the killing of a man on Skid Row, in the case that I had, he admitted on the stand. Now, he did not change his approach in dealing with people that have obvious mental illness. So why? This young officer was on the stand thinking he's doing what he's supposed to do. But you were trained to de-escalate. You didn't do that. No. Once they get in the field and they get in the threatening situation that they think is threatening, they think power will succeed. Overtake this. Don't de-escalate. And so what Gladwell talks about is we have to start back at the beginning. Who do we put out there? Do we put the high school graduate? Do we put the guy who just came back from two trips to wherever the war is at the time? Do we put him on the police department because he can kill? Because he can kill readily without hesitation. He has killed so many enemy combatants. He doesn't deal with the civil rights of the people here in this country. He look at them as enemy combatants, and he can kill like that. And so we don't put the qualified people we should be putting in law enforcement with guns in their hand. We need more educated people in law enforcement, more seasoned people, more mature people, not these young officers coming back from combat, or even the old ones who have been through combat and think that's the way to deal with people, like they are the enemy. They are not on the battlefield with us. You follow me? All of us are susceptible to losing it, and we should be given the benefit of the doubt. When police officers kill, they are given the benefit of the doubt. When they go to court, the jury presumes they are innocent. When we go to court, we are presumed guilty. And that's what it looks like when you go in a courtroom in front of a jury and you're a black man. You presume guilty. You better do all you can to prove that you are not guilty. When a police officer go to court, they are presumed innocent. I've done enough seminars with attorneys who represent officers, and they laugh. They go, "We don't know why you do what you do, man, because I go to court and my guy is presumed innocent." I said, "Yeah, I know. So it's a whole restructuring that we have to do. The police chief established the culture in his department. He can demand that X, Y, and Z is the policy, the practice, and the culture in his department, or he can let it go like cowboys, like it usually does. And the police, it stops with the police chief. He has to change the culture, and he also has to implement a hiring policy with people who can do this serious emotional labor job. It is not for the kid who barely got through high school, who has no further education on the thinking of people and how people think and react and the mental illnesses that we're dealing with. It is not for that, but that we keep hiring the same kind of person. We keep hiring the same individual who's qualified to kill and take advantage and take over situations, and it ain't working. So we expect something different, but we're doing the same thing. It ain't gonna happen.
Hey, Attorney Banks, you said something that was really instructive. That is that you're citing the statistic by the police department saying that the common factor is that people are not obeying police officer. Now, from the side of the victim, I've gotten the other side of this. That is that the people that I've talked to that have been involved with the police adverse encounters, they are afraid of the police officer. Like, for example, they don't like to be stopped in a darkened area. They like to go to a lit area. And so the police officer have assumed in numerous cases, like, you know, I've had an African-American woman, she is in a darkened area, and so she drives her car for an extra mile at a slow rate of speed to go to a gas station. There's light. Police always say, well, you're trying to escape. And, you know, so it's two sides to this, and I understand both sides, but particularly in view of the fact that I don't like the idea of this stopping in these darkened areas. I just don't, I think it's a bad idea, Attorney Banks.
Banks, let me interrupt you 1 minute, my last thought on what I was saying, and that is these officers know because they are presumed innocent, they're more likely than not will not be convicted, Nathaniel, as opposed to the rest of us in society. In the front page of the paper today, there is a police detective here in LA who's up for parole, and the parole board recommended her release. She got a murder of her ex-boyfriend's wife she killed. It was a 23-year-old cold case, and they found new evidence, and they convicted her in 2009. She was up for parole, and the recommendation is to be released. The family and everybody of the dead woman is upset about it. But I haven't seen nobody with a 27 to life sentence get a recommendation for parole the first time up. Or if ever, that life top, it pretty much means that in California. But for this person, a police officer, they're recommending release after 12 years or 13 years in custody. So they know that they have the best chance of not getting convicted, that jurors are either scared of them or just think that they are there to protect them. So they give them the benefit of the doubt. And I've seen it throughout cases that I've followed. I don't follow every one, but I followed enough of them to say, that's bull. This is a bull verdict. So excuse me, Vanita, that's me. That's it.
Thank you, Attorney Grimes.
Thank
and
you.
Attorney Lee. Yes, there is this dichotomy, if you will, between the statement of citizens following direction of the police and then the anxieties and psychological aspects and factors that citizens experience when they're stopped by the police. We have to understand that our communities, justifiably so, harbor a lot of realistic fear of the police. And we have to get to the reasons for that, which, are well documented. And we need to start talking about, those dynamics, including focus groups addressing that very same issue. Attorney Lee, it's reasonable for a female or anyone else to say that they would like to drive to a lighted area in response to a police stop. What do you think, Attorney Grimes?
Absolutely. Female, teenagers, young men, they have the power to kill. They have the authority to stop. And it's an awesome amount of power. And we see enough abuse of it that the public, especially certain segments of the public, minority men especially, and women, feel threatened by them. And so, yes, I think we are entitled to go to a place of what we consider to be more safe than the open areas where they may stop us or the darkened areas where they may stop us. I firmly believe that. I'm not speeding, I'm following the law. I'll never forget Rodney King lying prone on the ground has given up. His arms spread out. Nobody's asked the questions for some reason. Why did he get up? Why did he get up off the ground and your video starts with him getting hit side the head with this baton after obeying them, laying out? Because the officer told him, N-word, we're going to kill your ass. You better run. So the man was getting up to try to live, and they justified beating him. So they thought they were isolated. And if it hadn't been for Holloway across the road, they would have been isolated. That video would never have done its job. But so happened, he had a video and he showed. But he shows them getting up before he's hit. But he had laid on the ground before they started beating him. And he never got up.
Okay, let's go to the phone line. Caller, Imhotep, you got a question or comment today? Hello?
Yes, how you doing? Brother Lee?
We're doing fantastic.
Yes, how you doing? Attorney Banks, Attorney Grimes, thank you for taking my call.
Good morning.
Really appreciate it. This is a subject near and dear to me. I talked with the Deputy Chief, Kendall Adams, on the radio 2 Sundays ago with Cameron Riddle. Cameron is the one of the reporters for Radio 1 and for Fox 59 News here. He was at the scene of the tree shooting. At first, the police said that the gentleman had a gun. They took drones. They took canvas by foot. They did everything. They looked all over. They never found a gun. And I asked the deputy chief that, I say, you never found a gun? He admitted, no, we never found a gun. I told him, I said, I think you all are using the fact that Indiana does not have a permit now, and that the Second Amendment is the law of the land. Second Amendment is the right. That's the constitutional right. To just say, well, people got a gun, and then you shoot. When you can't pretextual know if they're legal or not, illegal or illegal, unless you have another doorway to go in. You can't. Supreme Court in Bruin and Clarence Thomas was one of them that wrote, having a gun is not against the law. So you can't know if someone's illegal or legal unless you got another reason to get in that doorway. In Indiana now, because you don't have to have a permit. I said, I'm a permit holder. I keep one because I travel to different states and I want to have reciprocity. California wouldn't give me reciprocity. I don't think New York, Florida, and I believe it's 4 states, Connecticut, if I remember for sure. But the bottom line is that the problem here, Nate and Attorney Banks and Attorney Grimes, is we have a media here, black media here, who coddles the police. I know. I've talked to them for years. Trust me. I've been doing this for a while. Okay. I talked to them. I've talked to all of them. Okay. And I'm telling you, Cameron was protecting him against me and my questions. We went at it. Go back and look at the tape. Listen to the tape 2 weeks ago. Outside lines. Open lines. We went at it. The deputy chief said that he thinks the media first is prejudiced against them and think that the people think that the cops are guilty first. I said, that's not true. I said, I got Washington Post, Harvard studies, I got University of Chicago studies, especially after George Floyd, that shows that generally the people think the people are guilty. That's why now you have a lot of news organizations that don't even put names out unless they've been charged by the prosecutor's office. They don't report everything like that. Matter of fact, I told Cameron, I said, as a journalist, you should want to verify whatever they're saying first. Washington Post says now we need to verify what they're saying before just going with the story as the media normally does. They protect them here. Tina Cosby, James Patterson, Cameron, they've had them on, and they don't want us asking them tough questions. I get to asking tough questions, then they cut me off or they put me off. They don't want to. They coddle and protect them. I'm telling you what I know. Trust me. I'm telling you what I know. This is why we can't get transparency. This is why we can't get to the truth of the matter. And this is what I left Cameron with. The Washington Post has a banner on there that says, democracy dies in the darkness. The job of the media is to dig in the dark and bring that to light for the people. You don't work for the police department. You don't work for them. You work for us, honestly, the public. You should illuminate the dark so we can see. But yet, I'm telling you here, they try to protect them and they coddle them, and it's terrible. And that is a lot of the problem.
Okay. Well, thanks, Amber. Now,
and thank you. And it's terrible what happened here. And they need to get the Justice Department here. You're right. Justice Department needs to come in. David Green is right. And Kristen Clark, I want to thank her again. What she's doing, Attorney Banks, is wonderful. They put a report out about schools and suspensions, and Kristen Clark over the Civil Rights Division.
I got to go to a couple other callers. But
okay, no problem. I'm going to go. I just want to throw it out there. Thank you for Ms. Clark. Thank you. Have a great.
Okay. Now, the next caller, Sevilla Perry, what's your question or comment for today, ma'am? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, what's your question or comments for today?
Yes, I have a comment. You told me to call last week to talk about mental health and Circle City Clubhouse. I don't know if you remember that. But anyway, there's an organization here that helps people with severe mental illness. We were very involved in the 988 system that was passed. I think it was SB1. And it really helps people with severe mental illness. I have a severe mental illness. And I think a lot of times people with severe mental illness are blamed for a lot of shootings and killings, which we are not. We are no more a threat than anybody else. In fact, we're a threat to each other, a threat to ourselves more than anything else. I think that mental health needs to be addressed with people who have mental illness in the community, and it's not. It's been stigmatized in the Black community, and we don't talk about it. And we need to
quickly. What do you think? I mean, we understand there's a problem. In 30 seconds or less, give me a solution. What is the solution, real quickly?
The solution is getting people to psychosocial rehabilitation and getting them the help that they need through letting them know that they're loved, they're cared, and they're appreciated. There's an organization called Circle City Clubhouse here in Indianapolis that does just that. It doesn't handle only the clinical side with medication and therapy. It also handles a lot of people have been institutionalized or in the streets, and we basically tell them what is it that you want to do, what are your strengths, what are your abilities. We don't focus
Well,
on
wait,
them being
I hate to cut you off, but
institutionalized.
here's the thing. Here's one thing that's very important that you understand. I want to make something real clear to everyone. Indiana passed laws along with other states that give everybody the right to carry a gun, except people with certain felony convictions, things like that. One of the things that have been troublesome is that whether you have mental health issues or not, if you display a loaded weapon, that appears to be the boundary that the police officer seems like they, in their mind, justify using deadly force. So mental health or not, I want to make something real clear. It's the possession of a weapon which is dangerous to both sides. And so we do have issues of people with severe mental illness who use weapons of mass destruction, goes out and kill people. So that's the key thing. So my suggestion is that if you have a mental illness, don't brandish a gun. I don't know how you feel about that, Milton, Vanita, but I think that's a starting point. And she was saying the treatment, but I'm thinking you shouldn't have all these guns if you have a mental illness. I'm not in favor of people with mental illness owning guns.
We have too many guns in this country with and without mental ill people possessing them. The mentally unill have too many guns, like I was speaking about the judge friend of mine with 49 guns. There are too many guns in America, and especially assault weapons. An assault weapon is for no other purpose than mass shooting, and you don't kill an animal with mass shooting, do you, Nathaniel? When you go hunting, do you want to shoot that animal 20 times or 10 times? Usually you just want one bullet, but there's no justification for the mass weapons that we have on the streets.
Absolutely, too many guns in this country, more guns than people. But with respect to mental health services, I agree with the caller. And I would ask, what are the mental health services? I advocate that every citizen understand on that state and local budget what the funds are for health and specifically mental health services. And I would ask the caller with respect to her organization, whether or not that state and local line item budget includes funding for her organization's growth in the city of Indianapolis. Also, back to police reform, we know that there's a playbook for police reform in the United States, and that under President Obama's administration, he appointed a task force which issued a report. It's the 21st century policing report, and it is organized around 6 subject areas and 6 pillars. They're called these subject topic areas or pillars, include building trust and legitimacy, policy and oversight, technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, officer training and education, and officer safety and wellness. So I would ask leaders and citizens in every city, town across the United States, what elements of the 21st century policing recommendations are being implemented in your community?
Excellent point. Thank you. Now, let's go back to the line again. Caller Ken and Sharon, you have a question coming for us?
Excellent point. Yes.
Let's go back to the line again. Caller
Yes, good afternoon, Attorney Lee. My nephew was killed by IMPD on 21st and
Miss
Shaman.
Cannon, hey, turn your
And we
radio
haven't
off a little
heard.
bit.
Okay,
Turn your radio down because you're. Go ahead.
Okay, I did. Okay, my nephew was killed by IMPD on 21st and Shaman. And it's like they're trying to sweep it under the rug because they talk about every other case but his. But this particular officer who shot him, his name was Frederick Davis, my nephew, had been harassing him, and he was homeless because he was mentally ill, and he knew this. And he had been harassing him, and about 10 minutes before he killed him, he was running from him. He had chased him out in traffic. And first of all, he woke him out of his sleep, and he chased him out in traffic saying he was trespassing. My thing is, IMPD has not contacted us. I'm a spokesperson for our family. Has not contacted us, has not tried to give us any type of explanation of what they put out there, that he was wrestling with the officer, and the officer, he got his personal gun and shot him. First, we want to know why was he carrying a personal gun in the first place. Second, they said that the people in Burger King said that's not what happened. Of course, IMPD is going to change their story. Second of all, they told us that he had been shot one time, but that wasn't true. He had been shot several times. Another question is, we want to know how he got out of Burger King and on the parking lot, laid out before the medics could get there, and they had him in handcuffs. And I know he was outside on the ground because my son was there and they threatened to lock him up because he was over there trying to comfort him because that was his cousin. But we haven't had any transparency from them. We haven't had any calls from them. We haven't had any body cam footage. They've hardly even mentioned his case. And they don't mention that the officer harassed him. He had a dog he called Hollywood. He took that dog everywhere he went. He had taken his dog. And, he just harassed him. And we're trying to get some help. There's people that are trying to help us. But IMPD is out of control not all IMPD. I'm saying some of these officers are out of control.
Well, Ms. Sharon, how long ago did this happen?
Good IMPD officers.
Ms. Sharon, when did this occur? This is recent or this last year?
On October the 6th.
October the 6th? I missed that one. I'm sorry. I was monitoring some of those, and so I didn't take a look at that case. So that was at October 6th of this year at what was the address?
It was at the Burger King on 21st and Shaman. It happened it happened in the afternoon, late afternoon.
Well, I tell you what, give me a call on Monday afternoon. I'll take a look at that. I didn't follow that case. I collected evidence on a few other ones because
they're not even talking about that case. And they were on the radio on TLC, and when I asked him about it, he said, well, you need to talk to homicide, and because I was telling him the same thing, you need to talk to homicide. And, it's like they told us he had been shot one time when the Undertaker, we had to close his casket because the embalming fluid wouldn't even stay in his body. You know what I mean? So they're not talking about it. They're not talking to us about it. So we just want, like I told them, we just want some transparency. Show us the video, show us the body cam, show us something. And then when they were talking about the body cam, they were talking about that it's edited and they can't tell whoever this is a third party that edits it, and they can't tell them what to take in and what to put in and what to put out. That's crazy. What are you editing it for? What are you giving this body cam for if it's all edited?
Well, thank you very much. Just call me on Monday afternoon. I will get that evidence for you, okay? You take care, ma'am.
Come you on Monday
afternoon. Yes, ma'am.
And condolences,
Thank you, Mr.
condolences to you and your family, Miss Cannon.
Yes, ma'am.
Condolences to you and your family, Miss.
Wow. The thing about it is, Attorney Grimes and Banks, we've had so many of these shootings, and my head been spinning because as soon as, every morning I wake up, there's some shooting in our city now. I'm just sick of it, and it's hard to keep track of these shootings. So many that occurs between individuals shooting each other, police citizen is out of control. So we got to get some stability back, and we got to get these guns out of our community. Okay. Hey, Mo, you're on mute. Mute.
Just yelling and no one. Okay, Mr. Lee, your status is impeccable, and I know that it's pretty good, but in darkness or alone out there, you're no different from any of the other victims of these police shootings, my brother. So we need to do something about it.
Well, we do. What we typically do on these cases, I go out myself and investigate, and I try to, because in the community, most people know me, I get to talk to citizens, they volunteer information, and I protect their identity when necessary. And so we try to get source evidence right away. And we have a very good coroner's office. They give really objective evidence. You know, they don't try to protect police officers, they try to protect the public. So they're doing a good job in terms of that regard. And so we do have some checks and balances. And the third thing, we got a very good prosecutor. Our prosecutor prosecuted about 60 some odd police officers.
Yeah,
and a couple of these shootings, he's prosecuting them for various crimes, and they will get justice. And so, in other words, so our system is working in part, at least from the judicial standpoint here locally. Where we have a problem at, in my opinion, is that we don't have full disclosure of the facts in a timely manner. The caller has some frustration in the sense that this happened on October 5th. And so 6 weeks later, you know, people seeking answers. Evidence don't change, folks. I mean, the body cam footage, they could release the same day. Why do they need to hold on to it for 6 months? The audio of the police have their own intercom system where they could talk to each other on their own radio band. Why don't they release that right away? You know, so there's a lot of evidence in my mind that should be released, but they don't. And so I'm concerned about that. And the caller make a legitimate point, Turner, Banks, and Grimes. And that's probably a problem in your cities too. I mean, they hold on to evidence. And I think that when they do that, I think they're doing that to shield liability.
No kidding.
Absolutely, Attorney Lee. And we saw earlier this year in the aftermath of Tyree Nichols' killing in Memphis that the police department immediately turned over the body cam evidence.
I think that's a rare departure because we usually don't see that right away.
It was, and it was noted to be a rare departure from the norm.
Now, moving forward, Counsel, before the show started, we had talked about Breonna Taylor down in Louisville, Kentucky. The police officer shoots, 10, 12 times into the apartment, and that ended in a mistrial. Were you guys shocked with that mistrial?
Not shocked, Nathaniel. I said at the beginning of the show that the officers know that they are presumed innocent of misconduct and criminal actions because they've led the public to believe that they have to make sudden life and death decisions and not sit back on the couch and analyze things as we do with objectivity. So their life is on the line and they act sudden. Sometimes they make mistakes, but they presented it as unintentional and they think their life is in danger. And so they're given that benefit of the doubt. So these officers are going to justify their shooting with fear for their life.
We saw this week the judge in the jury. I'm sorry, let me back up. We saw in the Breonna Taylor federal charge against Brett Hankson, who's former Louisville Police Department detective. He's charged in this federal case in the killing of Breonna Taylor, where several officers implemented a no-knock warrant and killed Breonna Taylor while she was sleeping in her own home. Many of these officers, he was earlier acquitted in the state court, and he fired multiple shots in her home. And the judge this week issued a mistrial in the case after the jury was deadlocked. And as Milton stated, is this a surprise? No, given all the factors that Attorney Grimes has stated. And I will say that the Justice Department states that they do intend to retry this case.
Yeah. Hey, Milton, you're on mute still. You're on mute.
I'm trying to get on mute so that I don't cause this buzz going on. But, you know, so much can happen between this mistrial and the next trial date to mitigate and negotiate and get misdemeanor pleas. A lot of things can happen before the next trial. And I don't know what the verdict or what the count was before this mistrial. If it was a count that supported not guilty, the prosecution may decide, well, maybe we need to plea this case and deal this case out for probation. I've seen that happen.
Well, the other thing, Attorney Banks, you got a hot case going on there in the great city of Chicago with that lawyer, Ed Burke. What's going on there? Did I lose her?
Yes, sorry, coming off of mute. But yes, opening statements were made this week in a lawsuit criminal lawsuit filed against the longest serving alderman. And also he's an attorney, and he also chaired the most powerful committee, the finance committee of the city of Chicago. Opening statements were taken this week as he's facing 14 counts of bribery, extortion, and racketeering. And prosecuting attorneys' opening statements alleged that he sold his official position with the city of Chicago in exchange for law firm business. These are allegations that we've seen across the country. We were talking about Tom Girardi in a recent show, but some of the schemes included schemes to, establish a Burger King, in his ward, and the development of the old post office. And he threatened to block a fee increase at the Field Museum, the Chicago Field Museum, because the museum failed to hire a family friend as an intern. And so the prosecution is alleging a pattern of corruption, and the most important evidence in this case, as we've seen with the former president, is Ed Burke's own words. In fact, another alderman wore a wire for the government for 2 years. He was a government mole. And so Mr. Burke was indicted 4.5 years ago, but because of COVID and other issues, this case is just coming up for trial this week. So more to follow.
Well, I look at that, and this is a lengthy investigation. I was looking at the tagline. they had 8,900 recordings that they secretly recorded him over several years. Wow. 8,900 recordings. So his life was an open book.
Who can listen to all of that? Jesus. You know, guys, I've been doing some reading of late, and one of the books I'm reading is by this woman, Rachel Maddox, on MSNBC, and doing an analysis of our country back in the 30s and the 40s, when we were about a millisecond away from a fascist government, and Hitler was being praised in this country, and thousands of people were supporting Nazi Germany in this country. And we came very close to being a fascist country back in the late 30s and before the war, Second World War. And it seems to be behavior, especially Donald Trump and others in the Republican Party to the right, it seems to be the type of similar behavior where they do what they want to do and they lie to support what they are doing, and they just bulldozing through our established practice and principles and policies. And that's how they think they can make a change, by just bulldozing things over. So this is not something new, what's happening.
Well, the fourth topic this week, after an abundance of negative publicity, the Supreme Court issued an ethics standard for Supreme Court judges. Mm-hmm. Every lawyer in America is subject to ethical rule, and all the judges. Up until this point, the U.S. Supreme Court had no rule. That led to the Associate Justice Thomas taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in money from wealthy Republican donors.
Hundreds of thousands.
And I wouldn't say millions, because that plane trip that they took would have been by itself a couple $100,000 on a private jet. But the point is that these influential businessmen, their business enterprise will have cases of controversies that come before the court. And the net result is, do we have justice at that level? It's just a daunting task to think that these powerful, wealthy donors don't expect something in return. I mean, I think you got to be pretty naive to think that they're going to put up hundreds of thousands of dollars just because they're good guys. I don't know. Maybe in a fantasy world, maybe that does exist, but in the real world, I just don't think it does.
It doesn't exist, and Clarence Thomas is a perfect example of it. He is in this club, not the Jack and Jill, but it's the club, Horatio Alger's club. When they put him in that club, he started rubbing elbows with rich people who claimed to have grown up from poverty and became rich. And he initiated the practice of, which had never been done before, of new members being sworn in at the Supreme Court. And for the first time, taking pictures of in the Supreme Court. Now, all of these wealthy people who are new rich people, he is now buddies with. Do you think for one second that they do not feel that they would be entitled to some consideration if they have a lawsuit that would come before our U.S. Supreme Court? Do you think that Mr. Thomas would set forth his potential conflict of interest if they do? We are hypocrites with this whole thing.
The code, this new code introduced this week, is neither binding nor is it enforceable.
It's not new, is it, Vanita?
Well, basically, they've collected a lot of the different versions of documents in the past, and they basically doubled down. And from my perspective, they actually codify all of the things that the judges have been doing and have been recently exposed.
Right.
You know, the lavish vacations, yacht trips, the purchases of, you know, Clarence Thomas's mother's home,
Right.
the Bible of Frederick Douglass, purchased and provided to Clarence Thomas. All of these things have now been codified as fine, you know, and arguably they're weaker than existing federal law, which requires recusal. And so just amazing what I would call the tone deafness of the court in issuing this code this week.
I suggest to our listeners that they look up the New York Times article on Clarence Thomas about a month ago, where they lay out all of these things that, and not just him, Sotomayor and someone else has a little thing that they went on a vacation, expensive vacation on Nate. But our Supreme Court feel that they have qualified immunity, I guess, or something. I don't know.
Well, the code doesn't address the ethical issues and examples that we've been seeing in the news. And as I stated, essentially codifies those things as being, you know, fine, and allows the individual judges to make decisions regarding recusals as opposed to the court. And in fact, a transparent code of ethics should govern the receipt of gifts. I mean, many of us have worked for organizations where you could not take any gift from a vendor, for example, in excess of a nominal dollar amount. It should also clarify the disclosure requirements, explain when conflict of interest do in fact require recusals, and there also should be some enforcement mechanism that's not specifically addressed in this pronouncement of the code.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We've reached the end of our allotted time, and I'd like to thank our special superstar panel and all the callers that called us. And don't forget, we have Thanksgiving coming up next week, so we won't be on the air next week. Drive safe if you're going out and about. Until we meet again, be safe, and God bless you and keep you. Take care.